Ludwig van Beethoven, baptized December 17, 1770 to March 26, 1827, was a German composer and pianist. Beethoven remains one of the most admired composers in the history of Western music. His works rank amongst the most performed of the classical music repertoire and span the transition from the classical period to the Romantic era in classical music. His career has conventionally been divided into early, middle, and late periods. His early period, during which he forged his craft, is typically considered to have lasted until 1802. From 1802 to around 1812, his middle period showed an individual development from the styles of Joseph Haydn and Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and is sometimes characterized as heroic. During this time, he began to grow increasingly deaf. In his late period, from 1812 to 1827, he extended his innovations in musical form and expression. Beethoven was born in Bonn. His musical talent was obvious at an early age. He was initially harshly and intensively taught by his father Johann van Beethoven. Beethoven was later taught by the composer and conductor Christian Gottlieb Niffy, under whose tutelage he published his first work, a set of keyboard variations, in 1783. He found relief from a dysfunctional home life with the family of Helene von Brenning, whose children he loved, befriended, and taught piano. At age 21, he moved to Vienna, which subsequently became his base, and studied composition with Haydn. Beethoven then gained a reputation as a virtuoso pianist, and he was soon patronized by Karl Aloys, Prince Lichnowsky, for compositions, which resulted in his 3 Opus 1 piano trios, the earliest works to which he accorded an opus number in 1795. His first major orchestral work, the First Symphony, premiered in 1800, and his first set of string quartets was published in 1801. Despite his hearing deteriorating during this period, he continued to conduct, premiering his Third and Fifth Symphonies in 1804 and 1808, respectively. His violin concerto appeared in 1806. His last piano concerto No. 5, Op. 73, known as The Emperor, dedicated to his frequent patron Archduke Rudolph of Austria, was premiered in 1811, without Beethoven as soloist. He was almost completely deaf by 1814. And he then gave up performing and appearing in public. He described his problems with health and his unfulfilled personal life in 2 letters, his Heiligenstadt Testament 1802 to his brothers and his unsent love letter to an unknown, immortal beloved, 1812. After 1810, increasingly less socially involved, Beethoven composed many of his most admired works, including later symphonies, mature chamber music and the late piano sonatas. His only opera, Fidelio, first performed in 1805, was revised to its final version in 1814. He composed Missa Solemnis between 1819 and 1823, and his final symphony, No. 9, one of the first examples of a choral symphony, between 1822 and 1824. Written in his last years, his late string quartets, including the Grosse Fugue, of 1825 to 1826, are among his final achievements. After some months of bedridden illness, he died in 1827. Beethoven's works remain mainstays of the classical music repertoire. On his return journey to Vienna from Nixendorf in December 1826, illness struck Beethoven again. He was attended until his death by Dr. Andreas Waruch, who throughout December noticed symptoms including fever, jaundice and dropsy, with swollen limbs, coughing and breathing difficulties. Several operations were carried out to tap off the excess fluid from Beethoven's abdomen. Karl stayed by Beethoven's bedside during December, but left after the beginning of January to join the army at Iglau and did not see his uncle again. Although he wrote to him shortly afterwards, "My dear father, I am living in contentment and regret only that I am separated from you." Immediately following Karl's departure, Beethoven wrote a will making his nephew his sole heir. Later in January, Beethoven was attended by Dr. Malfatti, whose treatment, recognizing the seriousness of his patient's condition, was largely centered on alcohol. As the news spread of the severity of Beethoven's condition, many old friends came to visit, including Diabelli, Schuppanzigh, Lichnowsky, Schindler, the composer Johann Nepomuk Hummel and his pupil Ferdinand Hiller. Many tributes and gifts were also sent, including £100 from the Philharmonic Society in London and a case of expensive wine from Schatz. During this period, Beethoven was almost completely bedridden despite occasional efforts to rouse himself. On March 24, he said to Schindler and the others present, "Plaudite, amici, como idea finita est, applaud, friends, the comedy is over. Later that day, when the wine from Schott arrived, he whispered, pity, too late. Beethoven died on March 26, 1827 at the age of 56, only his friend Anselm Huttenbrenner and a Frau van Beethoven, possibly his old enemy Johanna van Beethoven, were present. According to Huttenbrenner, at about 5 p.m. there was a flash of lightning and a clap of thunder. Beethoven opened his eyes, lifted his right hand and looked up for several seconds with his fist clenched. Not another breath, not a heartbeat more. Many visitors came to the deathbed. Some locks of the dead man's hair were retained by Huttenbrenner and Hiller, amongst others. An autopsy revealed Beethoven had significant liver damage, which may have been due to his heavy alcohol consumption, and also considerable dilation of the auditory and other related nerves. Beethoven's funeral procession in Vienna on March 29, 1827 was attended by an estimated 10,000 people. Franz Schubert and the violinist Joseph Maysder were among the torchbearers. A funeral oration by the poet Franz Grillparzer was read by the actor Heinrich Anschutz. Beethoven was buried in the Waring Cemetery, northwest of Vienna, after a requiem mass at the Church of the Holy Trinity Dreifaltigkeitskirche in Alserstrasse. Beethoven's remains were exhumed for study in 1863 and moved in 1888 to Vienna Zentralfriedhof, where they were reinterred in a grave adjacent to that of Schubert. There is a museum, the Beethoven House, the place of his birth, in central Bonn. The same city has hosted a musical festival, the Beethoven Fest, since 1845. The festival was initially irregular but has been organized annually since 2007. The Ira F. Brilliant Center for Beethoven Studies. In the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Library, in the campus of San Jose State University, California, serves as a museum, research center, and host of lectures and performances devoted solely to Beethoven's life and works. The Beethoven Monument in Bonn was unveiled in August 1845, in honor of the 75th anniversary of his birth. It was the first statue of a composer created in Germany, and the music festival that accompanied the unveiling was the impetus for the very hasty construction of the original Beethoven Halle in Bonn. It was designed and built within less than a month. On the urging of Franz Liszt, Vienna honored Beethoven with a statue in 1880. The third largest crater on Mercury is named in his honor, as is the main belt asteroid 1815 Beethoven. Beethoven's music features twice on the Voyager Golden Record, a phonograph record containing a broad sample of the images, common sounds, languages, and music of Earth, sent into outer space with the two Voyager probes.